Hello, and welcome to the Real Life, Real Talk podcast. I'm your host, William Carr. Today, we will pose the question, what is right with our educational system? And we will look at this in this aspect of a positive approach to Reformation, changing the way we package education. Let's get started. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. A quote by Nelson Mandela. I served as a substitute teacher in a local system for more than 10 years. It has always disturbed me how students react to the substitute teacher. I recognize there are many factors that may cause such behavior, too many to discuss in this writing. But one factor could be the fear of the students experiencing something new or different than what they are accustomed to. In my last few days as a substitute teacher, I refrained from using the term substitute teacher. I began to use the term educator trainer. I was surprised at the response from the students of the title change. The information or educational material I presented did not change, only the way it was delivered. I received more positive feedback from students of those last few weeks than I had received over the 10 years. That experience raised a question in my mind, and as I think about it, maybe a question of perception. Did the students expect more from me as an educator trainer, or did I heighten their curiosity of what was an educational trainer? Of course, that question led to other questions. The result of those questions sparked an interest in doing research on our educational system. There were some questions I wanted to explore and examine. Let us get started with a brief examination of the history of public schools in America. Hundreds of years ago, most learning happened at home. Parents taught their children, or if their families could afford it, private tutors did the job. The Puritans were the first in the country to point out the need for some kind of public education. They established schools to teach not just the essentials, reading, writing, and math, but also to reinforce their core values. After the American Revolution, Thomas Jefferson argued that the newly independent nation needed an educational system, and he suggested that the tax dollars be used to fund it. His pleas were ignored, and the idea for a public school system languished for nearly a century. Most educational systems are based on reward versus punishment, with more emphasis placed on punishment. The classroom will need adjustment to express more reward systems. When business enterprises fail in marketing their products, one solution is to change the branding or packaging. In most instances, the idea of changing the packaging may or may not call for changing the product, but it does represent changing the presentation of the product. Changing the presentation of information, how we teach, can have a tremendous effect on how education is perceived by the end users, students. What is the definition of school? An organization that provides instructions such as an institution for the teaching of children, college and universities, a group of scholars and teachers pursuing knowledge together that with similar groups constituted a medieval university. What is the definition of public schools? An elementary or secondary school in the United States supported by public funds providing free education for children of a community or district. Primary or elementary education consists of the first 4 to 7 years of formal structured education. In general, primary education consists of 6 to 8 years of schooling starting at the age of 5 to 7, although this varies within countries. The division between primary and secondary education is somewhat arbitrary, but it generally occurs about 11 or 12 years of age. Some education system has separate middle school, with the transition to the final stage of secondary education taking place at around the age of 15. Secondary education in the United States did not emerge until 1910 with the rise of large corporations and advancing technologies in factories, which required skilled workers. In order to meet this new job demand, high schools were created with a curriculum focused on practical job skills that would better prepare students for white collar or skilled blue collar work. This proved beneficial for both employers and employees since they improved human capital, lower costs for the employer, while skilled employees received higher wages. The education sector or education system is a group of institutions, ministries of education, local educational authorities, teachers, training institutions, schools, universities, and etc., whose primary purpose is to provide education to children and young people in educational settings. It involves a wide range of people, developers, inspectors, school principals, teachers, school nurses, students, and so on. These institutions can vary according to the different contexts. Schools deliver education with support from the rest of the education system through various elements such as education policies and guidelines, to which school policies can refer curriculum and learning material, as well as pre and in-service teaching training programs. The school environment, both physical infrastructures and psychological school climate, is also guided by school policy that should ensure the well-being of students when they are in school. The education system is fully integrated into society through interaction with numerous stakeholders and other sectors. These include parents, local communities, religious leaders, stakeholders involved in health, child protection, justice and law enforcement, police, media, and political leadership. The shape, methodologies, taught material, the curriculum of formal education is decided by political decision makers along with federal agencies such as the State Education Agency in the United States. Here's a note. Higher education typically involves work toward a degree level or foundation degree qualification. Foundation degrees are not general degrees, but are focused on specific professions. There are no general set entry conditions. Commercial or industrial experience may be more important in gaining a place than formal qualification, and experience is always taken into account. This information comes from About Foundation Degrees, UCAS, October 10th, 2014. In most developed countries, a high proportion of the population, up to 50%, now enter higher education at some time in their lives. Higher education is therefore very important to national economies, both as a significant industry in its own right and a source of trained and educated personnel for the rest of the economy. Education is the process of facilitating learning or the acquisition of knowledge, skills, values, morals, beliefs, and habits. Educational methods, including teaching, training, storytelling, discussion, and directed research. Education frequently takes place under the guidance of educators. However, learners can also educate themselves. Education can take place in formal or informal settings, and any experience that has a formative effect on the way one thinks, feels, or acts may be considered educational. Formal education is commonly divided into stages such as preschool or kindergarten, primary school, secondary school, and then college, university, or apprenticeships. In most regions, education is compulsory up to a certain age. In informal learning, there's often a reference person, a peer or expert to guide the learner. If learners have a personal interest in what they are informally being taught, learners tend to expand their existing knowledge and conceive new ideas about the topic being learned. For example, a museum is traditionally considered an informal learning environment, and there is room for free choice, a diverse and potentially non-standardized range of topics, flexible structures, socially rich interaction, and no externally imposed assessments. While formal learning often takes place outside educational establishments and does not follow a specific curriculum, it can also occur within educational setting and even during formal learning situations. Educators can structure their lessons to directly utilize their students' informal learning skills within their education setting. How should schools look? A study conducted by the UNESCO, International Institute for Educational Planning, indicates that stronger capacity in educational planning and management may have an important spillover effect on the system as a whole. Sustainable capacity development requires complex interventions, institutional, organizational, and individual levels that could be based on some foundational principles. National leadership and ownership should be the touchstone of any intervention. Strategy must be context relevant and context specific. Plans should employ an integrated set of complementary interventions, though implementation may need to be perceived as steps. Partners should commit to a long-term investment in capacity development while working towards some short-term achievements. And outside intervention should be conditional on an impact assessment of national capacities at various levels. There should be core courses or curriculums starting at the earliest stage of learning. As students develop, the core courses or curriculum changes. Some suggested core courses or curriculum are communication, English, and communication skills, public speaking, developing skill sets of leadership, decision making, arithmetic and mathematics, complexity, science and observation, the use of learning tools, conflict resolution, and economics, answering the questions who, what, how much, and who decides. What should education do? Schools should provide adequate education for everyone. A change in semantics could solve some issues. Schools can become educational providers. Instead of using the term teachers, the term mentors slash coach or group leader would be appropriate. Classes can become enrichment programs taught from the perspective of interdisciplinary curriculums such as music with science and math, cultural enrichment such as history and language art. Grades become progress report starting with making progress at the beginning levels, understands the curriculum at the next level, and mastery of the curriculum at the highest level. Vocational education is a form of education focused on direct and practical training for a specific trade or craft. Vocational education may come in the form of an apprenticeship or internship, as well as institution teaching courses such as carpentry, agriculture, engineering, medicine, architecture, and the arts. In the past, Those who were disabled were often not eligible for public education. Children with disability was repeatedly denied an education by physicians or special tutors. These early physicians, people like Itard, Seguin, Howe, Gilaudet, set the foundation for special education today. They focused on individualized instructions and functional skills. In its early years, special education was only provided to people with severe disabilities, but more recently it has been open to anyone who has experienced difficulty learning. Open learning and electronic technology. Open education has been called the biggest change in the way people learn since the printing press. Despite favorable studies on effectiveness, many people may still desire to choose traditional campus education for social and cultural reasons. Many open universities are working to have the ability to offer students standardized testing and traditional degrees and credentials. Homeschools have benefits in certain areas or certain economic environments. However, they do not always provide interaction educationally with diverse communities and may not provide what is needed for growth. It is my opinion discipline are expressed, taught, in detached informational settings. Students may have difficulties associating the materials in time frames that are allotted for learning. It is evident students learn differently and at different rates. Students should learn how to be competitive in ways they can grow without pressure from a system that was not part of their environment while they were developing. For instance, the courts and the legal system have always been problematic with the legal rights of people of color. The majority of laws were created to suppress their civil rights, which in turn suppressed the right to receive quality education. Here are two proposals for change. Proposal number one: express the information slash material in a connect the dots format to show relationships of the information being expressed. As an example, show real life relationships of fractions to everyday uses. As an example, money, proportions, measurements, home buying, buying an automobile, saving and investment, and not as a mathematical slash arithmetic problem. Proposal number two: create learning centers, basic life skills, leadership skills, mathematics, reading, and communication as an advancing method of associating writing, speaking in public, or private venues. If the change or redesign of an educational system is to be considered, a few questions have to be asked and answered. Here are a few. What are the alternatives to the present educational system? Why do some school systems offer educational programs that are substandard while others offer programs of quality? Why is arithmetic taught in some school systems from the third to the eighth grades while missing the opportunity to advance students to the study of mathematics and science? Are some kids improperly diagnosed with learning disabilities? Why not incorporate these different educational systems into an educational program that can be used as a national system? Why aren't disciplines taught in an interdisciplinary system of learning? Why not leave educational programs to educators instead of politicians? We need the minds of the intellectual and the resolution of people of all races to sustain our existence on this planet. We cannot afford to separate, discriminate, or fail to emancipate the minds of people of all nations. As I close this conversation, I leave you with these thoughts about education. Education is the key that unlocks the golden door to freedom. George Washington Carver. The more that you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go. Dr. Seuss. Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Menendez. Education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. John Dewey. What makes a child gifted and talented may not always be good grades in school, but a different way of looking at the world and learning. Chuck Grassley. Intelligence plus character. That is the goal of true education. Martin Luther King Jr. Thanks for listening to my podcast. If you have any comments or observation about the podcast, you can send them to realifeministries@gmail.com. If you like the podcast, please share it with family and friends. If you like to be notified about new episodes, go to my website, https://wc2277.podbean.com, and click on follow. Until the next time, consider the information that was given today and see if there are any practical applications for your life. And remember to keep it real.